And Governor Schwarzenegger did something very interesting. He commissioned a landmark study called the California Performance Review, where he took 240 civil servants, a leader who had done the same thing in the state of Texas, and he said, go find how to run the state better, faster, smarter, leaner. Deploy technology to pull the government into the 21st century. They identified $32 billion worth of savings. Things like consolidating purchasing to save $400 million a year, renewing your state vehicle registration every 2 years as opposed to every 1 year, which would save $1 billion. Collapsing 18 call centers to 4, using state-of-the-art push technology and automated responses. Well, you know what happened with that study? Not much. And if we had even gotten half the amount of money that had been identified, or $15 billion, maybe we would have avoided the tax increase that we have now put on citizens of California. And here's the real tragedy. The average family in California who makes $45,000 a year with 2 children will pay an incremental $732 of incremental state tax in this year because of the tax increases that have been negotiated. The Obama administration stimulus for that same family is $800. So they will get $800 from the Obama administration, and they will turn around and send $732 of it to the state of California. And you know what? I just think that's wrong. What are we doing? We are cutting taxes at the federal level, raising them at the state level, and what it means for California is we will not, if there is a benefit to the stimulus, we will not see it here. They might as well just have sent the check from Washington to Sacramento and called it a day. So that's why I think we've just fundamentally got to change the way we view the management and leadership of the state to we can no longer afford the government we have. We have to give Californians the government that they deserve.
You know, Meg doesn't know this, but I served on that committee that Governor Schwarzenegger put together.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I knew you didn't. And so, and I'm a big fan of the governor, but let me just say that if there is one thing that the next governor can do that would make so much sense, it's looking back at those recommendations, because there are billions of dollars that could be saved, and many of them are relatively painless. But instead, they went on a shelf, unfortunately. So let me commend you for doing that, and I hope that will happen. What advice would you give to young women that are just starting out today?
Well, gosh, a couple of things, I think. I think first, find something that you love to do. Follow your passion. Don't follow what your peers think you ought to do. I almost hate to say this, I have a 24-year-old and a 21-year-old. Don't actually follow what your parents tell you to do. You know, do something that you are passionate about and that you love, because you will spend a lot of time at work or at your nonprofit or whatever it is that you're working, and you will be better at it if you love it. And so I would just encourage you to find something that motivates you, that kindles your inner spirit, and follow that path, because in the end, that will make all the difference.
So let's follow that just for a moment. You have 2 sons?
I do.
How did you ever, were you able to balance the care and the nurturing of 2 sons and your business career and your personal life? How do you do that?
You know, it's really hard. It is really hard. I mean, I often answer that question and say, with great difficulty. Because my husband has a very demanding career. He's now a neurosurgeon at Stanford, operates on brain tumors, and runs the residency program. And then our 2 boys were born in San Francisco when I joined Bain & Company. And I finally gave up the notion that you could do everything well, that you can't be a fabulous mother, a fabulous wife, a fabulous business person, a fabulous hostess, and a fabulous entertainer. And you know what's true? Is my house does not look like Martha Stewart just left. And you know, something has to give, right? And so I would say that we focused on what was most important, which was each other, our children, and our jobs. And we didn't do a lot of other entertaining. When we did things with friends on Saturday night, we did it with families. And so we were very judicious about focusing on trying to do the very best job we could with parents, as parents. I would also say that one piece of advice I would give you is to pick a really great partner.
Yeah.
My husband deserves a medal, because when I got to eBay, it became really clear that this was a classic Silicon Valley startup, and that he was going to have to pick up a much bigger part of the load than he had to date. And I must say, he was home every night with the boys when I was traveling almost half the time. He took up all the management of the family finances. He helped plan the vacations. I mean, he really stepped up to the plate. And I don't know that, my husband's from Birmingham, Alabama. And I don't know that, he was raised to have exactly that point of view.
Good point. I grew up in Texas. I know that feeling very well with the Texas men. That kind of reminds me, earlier I mentioned how important it was that we have so many women leaders in the room, but that it's also important that we have the men that are here. And my sense is that the men that are here understand the value of a real partnership and doing their part in a relationship. So thank you again to all the men that are in the room this evening. This will be the last question that I'll ask from the audience, and I have one more personal I'd like to ask. What are your thoughts on the managerial differences between being a CEO versus a government leader?
So I think there's many similarities, and then there are some differences as well. And the similarities, in any position where you are responsible for large organizations and changing how things are done and building companies or changing large organizations, in the end, it's all about one thing, isn't it? It's about leadership. It's about standing up and being counted. It's about having a very firm point of view, listening hard, but actually communicating a vision of what you want to accomplish and how everyone can be a part of that vision. And how you get to that vision often has to be quite a collaborative process. Part of what people say to me, well, it's going to be a hard transition to be governor because when you're the CEO, you say jump and people say how high. And I say, gee, that wasn't actually my experience. You've really got to bring people along, especially when you get to a large organization like an eBay or a Cisco or an Allstate or whatever. So I think it, in the end, is about leadership, it's about vision, it's about communication. And in the end, isn't it about what you choose to measure? And as you know, my passion is about job creation for the state of California and job retention. And I have said that we need to create 2 million jobs in California to restore ourselves to prosperity. And I imagine doing two things outside the governor's office. So in United Way, when you raise money in United Way, they have the thermometers that show how you're doing. I think we ought to have a thermometer that shows how we're doing on creating 2 million jobs in California. And then if you haven't been to LA recently, go down Santa Monica Boulevard and there's something called the Smoking Deaths billboard, which shows how many people have died from smoking. We ought to have a billboard outside the governor's office that shows how many jobs have left California. And we ought to understand why they left and where they went, and we ought to say, you know what, we're not going to have any more jobs leave California if we have anything to say about it.
Thank you. Well, I have the sense that when you're speaking to a Chamber of Commerce crowd, you've really hit on something that has been a real challenge for us to make sure that we not only have a business-friendly city and a county, but also a state, because we know that we are losing jobs. So I commend you for that. So Meg, this will be the last question. And what is the best piece of advice that you've received that you might want to share with our audience?
Let's see. I think it's going to sound very simple, but it was a piece of advice my dad gave me when I was about a 6th or 7th grader. And I really took it to heart. And he said, Meg, you never know what's going to happen in life. You never know where you'll end up. You'll never know the setbacks that you might face. And the best piece of advice you can do is always do your very best. Give it 150% all the time. And if it isn't good enough, at least you'll know that you gave it your very best.
I think that's great advice. Ladies and gentlemen, would you join me in thanking Meg?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Great job.
Thank you.